We're reading today from Galatians, the Biblical Precept of Freedom by Tim James, Pastor Tim James from Cherokee, North Carolina, Sequoia Baptist Church. We're going to read from the Galatians 5:25 through 26. If we live in the Spirit, let us also walk in the Spirit. Let us not be desirous of vainglory, provoking one another, envying one another. The last two verses of this chapter are a kind of summation of what Paul has described from verses 14 through 24. Verses 25 describes the spiritual life, union with Christ by the Spirit. Verse 26 describes the works of the flesh, which always interfere with and are always contrary to walking in the Spirit. If we live in the Spirit, let us also walk in the Spirit. Here we are referred back to the fruit of the Spirit that is produced by the indwelling Spirit of Christ. Union with Christ is the source of this fruit, and nothing about this fruit has to do with the works of the flesh on any level. Verses 16. Living in the Spirit and walking in the Spirit are obviously two distinct things. They are not the same thing, but they do derive from the same source. Evidently, one can live in the Spirit and at least for a time fail to walk in the Spirit, as did some of the Galatian believers. Because of the natural tendency of the old man, i.e. our old nature, to look for and recognize some progress, we're often confused as to what it is to walk in the Spirit. We may think that we are to pursue the fruit of the Spirit in the sense that we can see the production of these blessed things in our lives. In a sense, we are to seek to nourish that new nature that we might be found exercising faith, love, meekness, kindness, temperance, and long-suffering. Certainly these are worthy things and are worth seeking. This, however, causes a bit of a paradox. Fruit is gained or produced by anything other than union with the vine. This is true of any fruit, including the fruit of the Spirit. To actively seek these things, faith, love, meekness, kindness, temperance, and long-suffering, even though it is a noble endeavor, is to seek the effort and not the cause. Because we are who we are, and because the flesh is always contrary to the Spirit, so that we cannot do what we would, we will tend to look for the fruit of the Spirit and then look at what we have produced as evidence that we are indeed the children of God. Therein lies our problem. The moment we look for evidence, even good evidence, we're detoured from the path. This fruit will come. It must come to those who live in the Spirit, because they are virtually connected to the vine. John 15:5 through 16. However, the fruit is not the object of faith, and therefore to look for the fruit is to walk in the flesh and not in the Spirit. This fruit is the gracious outgrowth of the heart and is produced by Christ. The situation is addressed by Paul by the Spirit-inspired omission of a word when contrasting the works of the flesh and the fruit of the Spirit. Concerning the works of the flesh, Paul says that they are manifest, discernible as evidence. But concerning the fruit of the Spirit, he simply states that it is. He does not say that the fruit of the Spirit is manifest, because the fruit of the Spirit is of faith, and therefore is not of sight. Therefore, it cannot be viewed or observed as evidence. The difference is actually quite simple. The works of the flesh are evidence of the flesh. The fruit of the Spirit is the testimony of Christ written on the heart. The fruit of the Spirit, being spiritual fruit and therefore invisible to the eye, is nothing other than the Spirit of God, bearing witness with our spirit that we are the children of God. The only possible evidence of this fruit is faith, God-given faith. Only the one who has been given such faith is aware that he has it. And for the most part, he does not look to see evidence of it. Faith object is singular. Faith looks to Christ, always to Christ, and to nothing but Christ. If we look to fruit, we have abandoned faith and are not walking in the Spirit, but in the flesh. In those times when we are seeking to produce the fruit of the Spirit, we do so not in faith, but in unbelief. It is a hard lesson, and it is one that we have not yet fully learned. Though we know this to be so because we live by the Spirit, even when we are not walking by the Spirit, we have yet to learn it perfectly. And it is obvious we have not learned it perfectly because we are still exhorted to walk in the Spirit. To walk in the Spirit is to simply look to Christ and only to Christ. And with such looking, the fruit of the Spirit will flow as surely as fragrance is emanated from the rose. We trust Christ for the full and complete salvation of our souls. Shall we not then trust Him for the full production of the fruit of the Spirit? You may ask, how do I know if I have the fruit of the Spirit? If you do ask, you are looking in the wrong place. Look to Christ and the fruit will be there. And in that look to Christ, you will not fulfill the lust of the flesh. If you can see it, it is yours. You did it. You produced it. It is your evidence, and you will, on some level, take credit for it. And that will be the work of the flesh. But if Christ produced it, it has nothing to do with your doing or trying. So all glory for it belongs to Christ. You cannot look to Christ and look to yourself in the same glance. When John Newton wrote the words, "Do I love the Lord or no?" he was addressing a thing that plagues all of us from time to time. But I suggest that when he wrote these words, he was not looking to Christ, but to his own heart. He was searching out the effect rather than the steadfastly looking at the cause. 1 John 3:20 and 21. It is a simple principle, but it is not an easy one. In fact, according to the context in verse 17, it is impossible to accomplish this perfectly while we remain in the flesh. So what do? We are to diligently seek those fruits as evidence, or are we to seek to fix our eyes on Christ and not worry about evidence? The answer is clear. We live, exist, or have our being in the Spirit by the sovereign operation of the grace of God. Therefore, since we have nothing to do with the Spirit indwelling us, let us not try to produce for evidence that which is the assured product of that divine relationship. Galatians 3:3. The works of the flesh are manifest. The fruit of the Spirit just is. Fruit is an enigma. Faith is an enigma. Where the fruit of the Spirit is not present, faith does not exist. But where love, temperance, and such do exist, it is not evidence that faith exists. Faith alone is evidence. Hebrews 11:1. And its existence cannot be proven. Walking in the Spirit, looking to Christ, will not produce vain glory in self. It will not produce a provoking or contentious spirit. It will not produce envying or a discontented spirit. In fact, walking in the Spirit will not produce the fruit of the Spirit. Walking in the Spirit is acknowledging that Christ will and does produce the fruit of the Spirit. Walking in the Spirit is not looking to the effect, but rather looking to the cause. Matthew 6:33. Thank Brother Tim James. Amen.